How are we doing, guys? Broken Machine here. Welcome back to a new settings guide. Quite a positive reaction to my initial one, so sit back, relax, and let's get into this, shall we? At the top here we have the controls. I'd recommend setting the invert vertical look to whatever you use in other games. Below this we have the soldier aim sensitivity. I'd recommend somewhere between 30 and 50% for new and experienced players. Remember, low sensitivity, it is much easier to aim and stay on targets. With higher sensitivities, recoil does become a little bit more manageable and you do get those faster reactions. Personally, I use 100. Do not recommend using that unless you are good at the game. Also, do not change your sensitivity all the time. Stick with one setting and only go up by 10 or so when you get better at the game. Down below here we have the soldier aim sensitivity. If you set this as 100%, your hipfire and aim down sight sensitivities will feel exactly the same. If you want this to feel like Call of Duty, drop this down to 50%. Or if you want to be super fast while aiming down sight, up this to 200. These soldier sprint options here are personal preference. Use whatever works for you. I'd recommend having the soldier weapon zoom and steady scope on hold. Much easier to use in my opinion. As for the vehicle aim sensitivity, I would recommend having this pretty high. Vehicles are pretty easy to aim with and you don't need to be too accurate. These two options down here are once again personal preference. Use whatever works for you. Next up we have the control schemes. Personally, I like to use alternate on the soldier buttons. What this does is it changes the right analog to crouch or slide and changes circle or B on Xbox to melee attack and bayonet charge. With this you can easily crouch or slide and still be able to stay on target. Highly recommend this. As for the vehicle driver buttons, sticks, and all of these options down here for the planes as well, I would actually recommend just using what I use here. These are very simple settings and are very easy to use. As you get more experience with the game, you may want to have a little play here, but for now I would recommend using these. Now onto advanced. Aiming left-right acceleration, set this to 0 and there will be no acceleration when moving the sticks. So as soon as you touch the sticks, your aim will move almost instantly. If there's any acceleration, there will be some lag and you may find it a little tricky to stay on target. Do recommend setting this to 0. Next up we have the uniform soldier aiming. Highly recommend you turn this on. What this does is essentially it makes all sights, zooms, scopes and everything feel exactly the same in terms of sensitivity. So for example, if you picked up a sniper with say a 3x scope, aim down sight, turn 90 degrees to the right, and then did the same with a pistol, both would feel exactly the same in terms of sensitivity. This is really helpful when it comes to aiming better, muscle memory, and I highly recommend it. Do turn it on. Leave this coefficient at the default value unless you know what you're doing. Highly recommend you also use these same settings for the vehicles down below. Next we have the vehicle aim relative controls. Highly recommend you turn these off. Basically what happens here, if you have these on and you are in a tank looking to the rear of the tank and you push forward, the tank will actually go in the direction of the turret or something like that. It's very confusing, so I'd highly recommend you turn this off. Down below, of course, you want to decouple the aiming from turning, so as you're driving around you can still aim around with the turret and neither will affect the vehicle or the turret. Next we have an option here, the decouple pilot free look. I'd highly recommend you leave this off. Basically, when set to off, this uses the default free look behavior, which requires holding a button and which disables pitch roll while active. When set to on, this removes this requirement and it allows separate remapping of free look buttons or sticks. Setting this to on without remapping free look buttons or sticks is not recommended, they say, and will result in overloaded inputs. Basically, it gets a little complicated, so you may just want to leave this off for the time being. Now, these soldier zoom aim sensitivity options here, do recommend you leave these on 100 if you turned on uniform soldier aiming up here. So, as you can see, all the different zoom scopes, they will feel exactly the same in terms of sensitivity if you did turn on uniform soldier aiming. As for the vehicle sensitivity options here, honestly, you may just want to have a tweak with these. Vehicles and the turrets, tanks, planes and whatever are pretty easy to use, so you may as well go with a higher sensitivity. Now, this new option down here, the soldier aim ratio. What these do is it adjusts the ratio of vertical aim to horizontal aim for the soldier. At 100%, the crosshair moves the same distance when aiming vertically as it does when aiming horizontally. Lower values dampen the vertical input to aid with finer control, while values near 100% keep vertical and horizontal movement similar. Sound a little bit confusing? Probably. What I'd recommend here, if you really know what you're doing, have a play with these. But personally, because my aim is pretty good in this game, I would actually recommend you leave these on the default values unless you really know what you're doing. You're going to mess up your muscle memory, aim, and lots of other things by changing these. So unless you know what you're doing, leave these alone. If you do decide to change these to 100%, the crosshair will move the same distance when you aim up or down, or left and right. You might enjoy that, but if you've been playing Battlefield 5 a lot, this is gonna really mess up with your aim and your muscle memory. So, again, only change if you know what you're doing. It's gonna take a while to adjust if you do change it. Now, unfortunately, you cannot flip the triggers in this game currently. What I'd recommend you do, if you're on PS4, you can do it this way. On Xbox, there is another way to do it if you have an Xbox Elite controller. What you want to do is go to the PlayStation menus here, go all the way to Settings, Accessibility, go down here to Button Assignments, and enable Custom Button Assignments here. And what you want to do is flip L1 and L2 and R1 and R2. So you can aim down sight and fire your weapons much easier, and it's much more responsive and easier to control. Again, you can do this on Xbox, but I believe you do need an Xbox Elite controller. Next up, we have the controller tuning options. Turn off vibration, no need for it to be on, it does affect your aim. The center dead zone down below, I'd recommend setting somewhere between 10 and 20%. 11 is pretty responsive. Highly recommend that if you're fairly experienced at the game. Basically, what this does, it adjusts the dead zone. That's the area of the analog stick where if you move it, the game, if it's too high, the game doesn't register the input. If it's too low, the controller will feel super responsive and you may actually find it harder to aim on targets. So 11 is a nice sweet spot that I would highly recommend. You want to set this for both of the sticks, and I would recommend leaving the actual dead zone and the max input threshold alone. I've had a play of these and my aim is all over the place. Unless you really know what you're doing, do leave these alone. 11% here and the default values are enough. Now down below here, you want to drop these controller buttons all the way down to 0 and 5%, whichever one it will allow. Basically, these reduce the max input threshold for the triggers. So pretty much if you set this all the way down and you aim down sight, as soon as you press the button, you're going to aim down sight or fire your weapon. Next up, we have the gameplay options here. Obviously, you want to turn on the HUD. That's the heads-up display that you can see on screen. If you don't want motion, turn that off. And if you don't want to see player-created content, turn that off as well. Turn on the chat log so you can see the orders that the squad leader is giving and what your teammates are requesting. Magnify the chat if you want. Turn on inventory, set it to when active, and do recommend turning on the kill log if you want to see a kill feed or a kill log as it's described in this game in the top right-hand corner. You can set some filters here if you wish. Down below we have the score log weapon name. I like to put this on for the stream. I would turn it off if you're not streaming. Also recommend turning off the awards unless you really want to see them. Personally, I find these get in the way. Turn on vehicle seat info so you can see who is in which seat of the vehicles. Turn on critical messages and share usage data. Basically, if you run into any bugs, lag or whatever, crashes, that kind of thing, the game will send the data to DICE and EA, and hopefully they can use that to fix the game. Overlay shadow strength, I'd recommend leaving this on default. Now, some crosshair options down here. I'd recommend leaving the crosshair visibility on 100. Crosshair color, lots of options to choose from. I quite like a nice kind of purple pink, sometimes a nice green. Honestly, there is so many options here. I'll put some comparisons on screen right now if you want to check those out. The reason I like a nice purple or kind of like a pink, kind of like this, is it's very easy to follow and it's not too distracting. Personally, I find something like a white crosshair kind of just blends in and I kind of lose it, but a nice pinky purple works for me, or even a nice green. Some people prefer something bright, some people prefer something that kind of fades in. Honestly, do some testing and see what works for you. Do recommend trying out the pinky purple one though, that really works well for me. You can also set the sight glow for the sights here. I'd recommend leaving this at 100. Have a look at what's going on screen right now and see what works for you. Personally, 100% works just fine. You can also change the sight colors here if you wish. Honestly, I kind of just like a yellow and a green here. These work well for me. Again, personal preference. Try the crosshair colors. If you like that, apply the same settings to these. Now below here we have the hit indicators. I've got a color scheme going on here that makes the game a little easier. So basically, the hit color is blue, headshot is red, and the kill color is green. So if I get a standard hit, it pops up blue. I know I'm not doing the most amount of damage I could be doing. If it pops up red, maybe I just need to get a couple more body shots and I'll be able to take out the enemy. And as soon as I see green, I know to move on to another target or get the hell out of the area. Highly recommend this setup. It will help speed up your gameplay and make things a little easier. Do recommend turning on the damage-based shape. That'll make things easier as well. And also set the armor hit indicator color to something different from those above. A yellow works for me. Now, as for minimap settings here, again, personal preference. Use what works for you. If you like what you see on my screen, just copy these settings here. Now, these icon opacities here, you want to adjust these a little bit. I like 90 for all these above here, and I like to bring it down just a bit while aiming down sight on these options down below. So for example here, we have the objective icon opacity at 30%. So when I'm aiming down sight, the icons slowly fade away so they don't get in the way. Highly recommend copying these settings and having a tweak for yourself. Now we have the advanced options here. Highly recommend you turn on auto leaning and auto peek over. Pretty self-explanatory, very useful in certain situations. Can be a little bit annoying though in some places, so do bear in mind sometimes you may get caught out. It can be pretty annoying when you're running up to a bush, you try aiming down sight and your character decides to lean or peek over. Can be quite frustrating. Next, parachute auto deploy. Turn that off so you can deploy your parachute whenever you like. You can do this on PS4 by pressing X, and I believe it is A on Xbox. I'm not sure about PC at the moment. Next, we have the context-based order giving. If you're a squad leader and you turn this on, essentially you can just look at a flag and direct your teammates to them instead of bringing up the comma rows. Very useful. Next, we have the plane chase camera roll. If you want this to follow the plane as you spin around, turn this on, turn it off if you don't. Soldier aim assist. Now this is a new option. You can change how powerful the aim assist is for you. 100% is default, of course. I like somewhere around 50 and 60. That works well for me. Drop it down to 0 if you don't want any aim assist at all. This game is pretty fast paced, and on console I would recommend just having a little bit. 50 works for me, and it's amazing when sniping as well. You can stay on targets and it doesn't drift all over the place when multiple people are on your screen. Somewhere between 50 and 80% should be perfectly fine for most people. Now the next aim assist option only affects single player, and this is the zoom or snap aiming. At the moment mine's on 100 because I haven't changed it, but I'm going to drop that down to 0%. Again, personal preference, but you won't see this being used in multiplayer. Now, you do not want any aim assist in the vehicles. Definitely not. If you've ever been in a tank and you've seen tons of infantry in front of you, you'll know why. Basically, you'll get stuck on all the targets and you'll find it very difficult to actually choose the target sometimes. So, do recommend turning this off. Below, turn on the reload hint. I prefer to leave this on. Sometimes you forget to reload, so do leave this on. As for the hint system, if you're new at the game, turn it on. If you're experienced, turn it off. Below, we have the network performance graph. Turn this on if you're having network issues, lag, connectivity, that kind of thing, and record your gameplay and send it to DICE or EA. My connection is pretty consistent, so I just leave this off. At the bottom here we have the aim lead indicator. What this does is it will pop up if your ping to the server is high, and it'll let you know that you need to compensate by leading your aim. Personally, I've never seen this. My ping is always good and I only play on servers nearby, but if your ping is really high, do recommend leaving this on, and you'll see the icon pop up and you'll have to aim just a little bit further ahead. Not really an issue in close quarters, but if you're sniping at longer ranges and your opponents are running across left and right on the screen, then you're gonna have to compensate. Next, we have the audio options. I would leave the master volume at 100%. Do recommend turning off the music, as this can kind of get in the way of some sounds. If you like the music, leave it on though, it is pretty awesome. As for the output configuration, auto, stereo, surround, what do you use? At the moment, I'd recommend leaving this on stereo unless you do have a surround system. Down below we have headphones, 3D headphones, war tapes, speakers, night modes, and that's all of them actually. At the moment I use headphones. I do switch to 3D headphones now and then, but the footsteps at the minute are a little bit flaky. They come and go, they're here and there, so have a play between stereo headphones and 3D headphones and see which one you find to be more consistent. If you want a really awesome experience, do recommend changing it to war tapes. It's a little distorted, but it sounds awesome. And to be honest, footsteps are a little better here. Do recommend giving this one a go, but again, it is distorted, but it does sound absolutely amazing. If you're using speakers, obviously set it to speakers here. And there is also a night mode. Basically, this has a more narrow dynamic range and is more suitable for listening at a lower volume. You can set the announcer language here if you need to, and you can also enable or disable the in-game announcer. I like to leave this on so I know what's going on around me. Turn on VoIP if you want to chat to people in-game, and down below here we have some subtitle options if you need them. Lastly, we have video. I'd recommend somewhere between 50 and 60% on the brightness. If you go too dark, you won't see people in corners, and if you go too bright, the game looks incredibly washed out. However, it does work quite well on some maps. Devastation of Rotterdam, I like to up the brightness just a little bit on this map. Now, field of view, this is what you see in front of you, the observable world. I would set this to 74. That will give you a horizontal FOV of 90. That is a good sweet spot I'd highly recommend. Now, if you go really low, your targets become bigger, but you lose that peripheral vision. So it's a little easier to aim and stay on targets, but you can't really see what's left and right around you. If you go all the way up, all the way high on the FOV, you can see all the way to the left and all the way to the right, but targets at range become much smaller and much more tricky to stay on target. So there's kind of a big downside to it. Again, it is personal preference, but 74 or a horizontal FOV of 90 is a nice sweet spot I'd highly recommend. As for the vehicle third person field of view, you may as well set this all the way up so you can see what's around your vehicles. Now, next up we have the ADS field of view. If you set this to off, you will get a slightly added zoom while aiming down sights. I like this off, it works for me and makes aiming a little easier. Now if you turn this on, however, you don't get that zoom and it's a little different. It's personal preference, but I like that added zoom. Turn down motion blur all the way, no need for that to be on. And next, I've actually changed this. This is the ADS depth of field effects. I like this on actually. So there is a little bit of a depth of field effect while aiming down sight on any of the weapons. Personally, I don't really like that. However, there are benefits to using this. Basically, if you have this on, when someone is firing at you and they're suppressing you, you'll know about it as the screen goes blurry around the edges. So you'll know when someone's firing at you specifically. And also, remember when you're being suppressed, you do get spotted on the screen for a short amount of time. So for that reason, I would highly recommend you leave this on. Now, custom color settings here. I'm not actually colorblind, but I like to set this to Tritanopia because it gives the colors a little pop and looks a little better. A little bit more contrast. Doesn't really change the colors too much, but it looks pretty awesome. There are more options here if you are colorblind, and you can actually customize the HUD completely color-wise and have a completely custom setup here. I've seen lots of streamers do this and it looks pretty awesome. Have a play of this if you wish, or just try it on Tritanopia. All of these options down here, chromatic aberration, film grain, turn these all off. You don't need them and you may just get a tiny FPS boost by doing so. And that's all I've got for you guys today. I hope this guide was helpful. Drop a like if you've enjoyed it, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Take it easy and I'll catch you later.